this morning. So as Brian says, get dressed, put on your orange today, your black today, dress up the kids, have a lot of fun.
Hey, you know what we just did?
What's that?
We blew it for the whole channel now. Nobody else can play this song because of that 25.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The whole channel's allowed to play the song.
It's a music violation.
They can play another version.
Right, Shepard Smith, I'm sorry, you're out of luck.
Oh, there's a song, Toba. Toba's our audio guy who's been on the show since the beginning, probably, right? He's so good. Toba, there's a song that we sang in first grade. We're going to have to find it and play it at some point.
Wait, first grade at your school in South Carolina?
Yes, and we would all stand up in the classroom, Miss Jones's classroom, and we would all do our stew. None in our witch's brew, we got magic, alakazam, kazoo, and you put in like monkey tails. I don't remember what else. Fingernails, something, ton, too.
Yeah, Toba, find it, all right?
In my witch's brew.
I'm sure he's got some...
It was such a cute song.
You know
all the kids loved it.
Apparently, Toba can't find it, but if you know what that song is, email us, friends at
My
FoxNews.com.
mom does. She was a school teacher forever.
Yeah, go ahead.
She found it.
That's it.
If you're a parent, you've got to find that on YouTube, and you got to play it for your kids. And get them all to stand up.
With their...
It's all kinds of gross stuff you put in there.
Just get your cauldron.
Y'all, that made me so happy. Thank you, Toba.
Right.
So anyway,
by the way, there is no Toba.
A little less than 2 hours from right now, we're actually going to dress up in costumes. What do you think we're going to be wearing? Rick has emailed us his suggestion. And it looks like it's going to be the Wizard of Oz. I should be a scarecrow. Aisley should be a lioness. And Brian Tin Man.
It's like
a Tin Man with no brain or no heart?
Oil can. Oil can.
Who needs a heart?
If I only had a heart.
The lion needs courage. The Tin Man needs a heart.
Right, I need a heart. I'll tell you what, I need Griff right now because we have some great news. The Benghazi investigation continuing, and we've got a big guy. We have captured one of the militants accused of orchestrating the deadly Benghazi attacks. Many people think this was his idea.
And he is expected on U.S. soil, and he's expected to face charges.
All right, Griff Jenkins joins us right now from Washington with what we know. Griff?
That's right, guys. U.S. Special Operations Forces and the FBI delivering some justice to the families of those 4 Americans killed in Benghazi, capturing an Islamic militant named Mustafa al-Imam along Libya's north coast. Imam is believed to have played an instrumental role in the attacks 5 years ago that killed U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens, Glenn Doherty, Sean Smith, and Tyrone Woods. President Trump, who gave the order for the high-stakes operation, said in a statement, quote, "To the families of these fallen heroes, I want you to know that your loved ones are not forgotten, and they will never be forgotten." The Trump administration's vigorous pursuit for justice has differed from the Obama administration's response. Multiple congressional investigations have sought to determine if the Obama administration willfully misled the public when former UN ambassador Susan Rice appeared on numerous Sunday shows, blaming the attack on a controversial video.
There was a hateful video, a direct result of a heinous and offensive video. This is a response to a hateful and offensive video. Violent protest outside of our embassy sparked by this hateful video.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions vowed to continue investigating and holding accountable all of those responsible for the Benghazi attack and, of course, bringing al-Imam to justice. Sessions says that he's bringing Imam back to D.C. to face charges in federal court rather than being sent to Guantanamo Bay, which surprises some perhaps. But as you may recall, earlier this month, another member of this attack, the mastermind, is facing trial right now. His name is Ahmed Abu Khattala. So this seems to be how they're handling it as they bring these terrorists to justice.
It does. All right, Griff, thank you very much. Griff was just talking about federal court. Let's talk about U.S. District Court in Midtown, Washington, D.C., Mid-District, I should say. Yesterday, Robert Mueller's 12-point indictment was unveiled, charging Paul Manafort and Richard Gates with all sorts of tax and money laundering for things they did a long time ago. What's interesting, though, is apparently, you know, that no-knock raid they had on Manafort's house a couple of months ago? They were able to seize evidence that essentially linked Mr. Manafort to his lobbying days for the Ukraine, which Manafort himself had said it did not exist. So they asked for certain documents. He said, we don't have them. They found him at his house during the no-knock raid. That's not good for him.
He's looking at 20 years. Yeah, he's looking at 20 years in prison, and they got a series of things. It's up to you're talking about a conspiracy to launder money to the tune of $18 million. They say that they have an explanation for all of it. Rick Gates was his protege, so they're both locked up. The biggest surprise came at about 10:30 Eastern time when they announced the indictment of Paul Papadopoulos, and this guy's a 30-something-year-old foreign policy advisor. He worked for free, but evidently in March of 2016 he met a professor in Italy named Joe Mifsud. He said it was no big deal. Turns out Mifsud connected him with a Russian who was tight with the Russian government, allegedly. So on the 27th of this year, January 27th of this year, he was asked about it. He didn't tell the truth then. Then on July 27th, they arrested him at Dulles Airport.
Right.
They kept it quiet. And they could have, judging by some of the legal language, flipped him. And many are wondering inside the White House, what did he do at that time? What was he taping? Perhaps it's this is like what they do with the mob. They get somebody, they tell them it's going to be curtains, and they scare him into turning in somebody more important than that.
Well, he already pled guilty. So,
but we don't know what he's going to be
well, we know
indicted for and what he's up against, depending on what he gave up.
He pled guilty to lying to the feds. That was the charge.
Right. But in terms of what they're going to ask in terms of the sentence is all about his cooperation, and they indicated he is cooperating, which people in the West Wing upset right now.
Well, the president responded, said, sorry, but this is years ago, before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't Crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus? Then he goes on to say, also, there is no collusion.
Also, we had Corey Lewandowski on the program just about a half an hour ago, and he said this about what's going on.
The indictments that Paul Manafort and Rick Gates that have been handed down to them had obviously nothing to do with their tenure at the campaign. They were from incidents that took place more than a decade ago. And what I think is very important is if it is true that Paul was under a FISA warrant prior to coming under the campaign, then I think the FBI should have probably notified the campaign and said, look, you've got a person here who is currently under surveillance, and we want to raise that issue to you so you're aware of it. Never was I contacted, never was the president or the candidate contacted about any relationship that Paul Manafort might have had by a government authority.
As wonderful as that sounds, they can't do that. The FBI couldn't go up to if someone were applying for a job at Fox News and tell the bosses, hey, we're looking at them, we're investigating them, until they find them guilty, right? You can't cost someone the job.
I understand his sentiment, though. What's interesting, though, is they're throwing the book at Manafort, assuming that he would flip and then say something, I have this information about Russia, which, essentially assumes he knows something about Russia, which a number of congressional committees thus far have not been able to find or prove.
But it shows a couple of things. That this is a wide-sweeping investigation beyond Russia, because Paul Manafort's linked to the Ukraine, and what he did prior to that clearly had nothing but beyond the campaign, but also beyond Russia, because most of his links were to the Ukraine and a pro-Russian Ukrainian government and international lobbying. It also shows that they can flip a witness and keep it quiet, because nobody had the Papadopoulos story, and that happened in the summer, and here we are at the end of October. So
meanwhile,
it could be even more sweeping, which makes people wonder, what is the goal? What is the goal of this? I mean, is anything that anybody ever did in and around the administration up for grabs? And why isn't, if they really want to be a fair and balanced investigation, why isn't the Tony Podesta thing flagrantly out there? Why did he get to resign and other people get indicted?
Well, this is just the opening salvo. We don't know what is going on. Ultimately, what we have seen, though, is Russia tried to manipulate our election. The big question is, was there any involvement with the campaign? So far, we have not seen any. All right. Meanwhile, last night on Laura Ingraham's premiere, she had as a special guest the Chief of Staff, John Kelly.
That's right. She asked him so many different questions. It was a great interview last night. Congratulations to Laura and to Shannon Bream that is launched last night. But she sat down with him for about 30 minutes. I watched the whole interview. I stayed up way too late, but it was so fascinating. And he talked about different things from, walking in Arlington when he spent that hour in response to those soldiers that were killed. He also talked about the removal of the plaque at Christ Church, which is an Episcopal church in Arlington, Virginia, right? It's in Arlington.
George Washington's church.
Alexandria, Virginia, and that's George Washington's church. Well, a lot of the leaders of the church are taking down the plaque, the George Washington plaque, because they say it makes some of the parishioners feel unsafe. This was his response to that.
Well, history's history. I think we make a mistake, though, as a society and certainly as individuals, when we take what is today accepted as right and wrong and go back 100, 200, 300 years or more and say what what Christopher Columbus did was wrong. 500 years later, it's inconceivable to me that you would take what we think now and apply it back then. I think it's just very, very dangerous, and it shows you how much of a lack of appreciation of history and what history is. I would tell you that Robert E. Lee was an honorable man. He was a man that gave up his country to fight for his state, which in 150 years ago was more important than country. It was always loyalty to state first back in those days. Men and women of good faith on both sides made their stand where their conscience had them make their stand.
So there's John Kelly. Just like the headline says right there, erasing history, a dangerous mistake.
What do you think,
Brian? We'll talk about it in a little while. I know we got to get to. All right, I guess we'll get to headlines a little bit later. All right, 12 minutes now after the hour.
Coming up, Robert Mueller issuing the first indictments in the Russia probe, but our next guest is a former federal prosecutor and says he may not be interested in justice at all. So what are they interested in? We'll find out next.
And he's a Hollywood A-lister that's been an outspoken critic of President Trump. But this morning, Bryan Cranston has the president's back.
Great.
Happy Halloween.
Oh, to you, too. Can you tell us more about this lead prosecutor? His name is Andrew Weissmann.
Yes, Mr. Weissmann was deputy director and then director of the Enron task force, which was notorious for abusive tactics and prosecutorial overreaching for a decade in its conduct of the Enron and related cases. For example, he destroyed Arthur Andersen and its 85,000 jobs with an indictment that didn't even state an offense, really. He had cobbled together parts of different statutes to make a crime out of something that wasn't. Andersen was destroyed, and 3 years later, the Supreme Court unanimously reversed it, with Justice Rehnquist writing for the court that it was shocking how little criminal culpability the jury instructions required, and Andersen had no way to know that its conduct was illegal.
He's also given money to past presidents, the DNC. He gave money to President Obama's campaign and the DNC. No record of him giving money to the Republican Party, correct?
Not that I know of. And he also prosecuted 4 Merrill Lynch executives and sent them to prison for a year on another faulty indictment, while he had yellow highlighted, he and his team had yellow highlighted but hidden evidence that showed they were innocent. So the defendants in the Manafort and Gates indictment or any other indictments that come forward need to do a really good job of trying to get evidence from the government that favors the defense.
So what is the goal here? What do you think Robert Mueller and his 16 lawyers that are on this team, what is their goal?
I think the entire investigation was set up basically to impugn this presidency and to make it as hard as possible for Mr. Trump to carry out his duties. It's been way too wide-reaching. The scope of it was too broad. It's got problems from its inception.
If that is true, that's corruption. What do you think of these charges yesterday?
I thought they are written to make it sound like even the most innocent act is a crime when it's not. I think they can be picked apart, and when scrutinized, many of them will fail. I think a lot of the conduct that is described in it is actually innocent, and there is not a tax offense alleged. They talk about him having failed to report certain income on his taxes, but there's no tax count in this indictment. It's basically 2 very wide-reaching conspiracy charges, which enables them to prove their case by using only hearsay evidence. They wouldn't even have to have an actual witness to whatever conversation they deem criminal to proceed with the conspiracy charge. They can use what somebody told somebody else that may not even have been right. So, and then the other charges are false statements and failure to file certain forms. So it's an unusual indictment.
All right, Sidney Powell.
And I think it's really just a shot across the bow.
All right, Sidney Powell, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A warning before you go trick-or-treating tonight. Drugs are already turning up in kids' candy bags, so you need to know some of this as a parent coming up. And you know him as the creator of Dilbert the comic, but he was also one of the first people to predict President Trump's victory. How did Scott Adams do it? He's going to tell us next.
Good morning. A Fox News alert. The manhunt for a suspect intensifying as we learn the identity of the person shot and killed in a carjacking at the University of Utah. Police say Austin Butane killed Chen Wei Gao, a student from China. The shooting causing a 6-hour lockdown. It happened shortly after Butane's wife went to campus to report that he had assaulted her. Classes are canceled today as police and the FBI continue to hunt for Butane. Another court battle involving the Trump administration, this time over the transgender military ban. A federal judge blocking most of the president's order to stop transgender people from enlisting. One part of that policy, though, can stay. The judge ruling government funds cannot be used for gender reassignment surgery. Let's talk Monday Night Football. Kansas City Chiefs cornerback Marcus Peters staying in the locker room during the anthem before helping his team beat the Denver Broncos 29-19. But the NFL's ratings continue to take a major hit, thanks in part to the World Series. The Astros' wild 13-12 victory over the Dodgers in Game 5, topping Sunday Night Football by more than 3 million viewers. Game 6 is tonight, so look at your headlines, guys. Do or die game.
All right. Thanks, Jillian. No editorializing. 25 minutes after the hour, you know him as the creator of those famous Dilbert comics, but he also is one of the first people to predict that Donald Trump would win the presidency.
Scott Adams revealing how Donald Trump used the power of persuasion to earn his place in the White House. In a brand new book, it's titled Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter. And he joins us now. Good morning to you, Scott.
Good morning.
How old is Dilbert, first of all?
Oh, he was born in 1989, so, you know, the big 3-0 is coming.
I was surprised Dilbert got political.
Well, he didn't get so political as his creator did. And I tried not to be political. I was trying to write about persuasion. I have a background as a trained hypnotist, and I've been studying persuasion in all its forms as part of what I do as a writer. And when I saw the president using the techniques of persuasion, I thought, well, people need to see this from another angle.
2015, you thought he'd be president.
I predicted, as soon as I saw some of his technique, especially the first debate where he handled the Rosie O'Donnell situation. I mean, using
I don't remember that question.
Break it down for us. Talk a little bit about how he uses persuasion and what you refer to as unnatural optimism.
Well, a lot of people don't know that his pastor was Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote the Power of Positive Thinking. And it's all about thinking your way into a better future, kind of the mind leading the reality. And you see that in what the president does. He's always making us think, past the sale. We're not thinking, should we build a wall? We're looking at 8 prototypes.
Right.
And we're thinking, well, which one do we pick? He's continually making us think about the future and imagine it visually, especially.
He's definitely a confident person. This was a clip of some of what he said on the campaign trail about building that wall.
We are building a wall on the southern border, which is absolutely necessary. Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall. And we have to start by building a wall, a big, beautiful, powerful wall.
And that was 2015, he said that. So you started seeing this, and what made you think that he was standing out above the other candidates, though? I'm sure they got a degree of persuasion.
Well, he's got what I call a powerful talent stack for persuasion, as well as related things. And the power of the talent stack is that you don't have to be the best in the world at any one of those things if you have enough things that work together. So, for example, he's a good public speaker, but nobody's going to say he's the greatest orator who ever lived. He's funny, which helps a lot, but he's not the best comedian.
That's Seinfeld, yeah.
Right. He's smart. He's not the smartest person in the world, and right down the list. But his power of persuasion is what makes that stack special, and it all works together.
So good at those 3-word phrases: lock her up, build the wall. Middle America, drain the swamp. Middle America felt like he represented them. He's confident. He doesn't stand for anything that's, the PC culture.
Yeah, hypnotists would call it pacing and leading. First, you match your audience in whatever ways. Could be physically, it could be the way they speak. And he speaks in a simple, relatable way that you can quote, you can remember it, he repeats it.
Right.
So he's got everything working for him. And that simple style, which people criticized at first and said, what's wrong with him with these simple words? By now, everybody's realized the power of these words. I'll give you one word that just says it all. Sad.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Hashtag sad.
Right.
So it's all part of branding. Essentially, he's a genius at branding.
If you look at his skills, he's a brander. He wrote a book on negotiating, and he's been on television. You know, he knows the reality TV world, and he's brought all of these things.
Scott, can he use all these things to run again and win in a couple of years?
I'm thinking that if he has a great 4 years, which, you know, he's off to a good start, you know, the economy's good. If the economy's booming, if he had 4% at any time in the 4 years, I think he'd have to be tempted to go out on top.
Right. Like a comic. You lead with the highest joke, even if it's not your last joke.
Like
One
Seinfeld.
term.
Well, I think if he's worried about his age catching up with him, wants to enjoy his, you know, his grandchildren, he might reconsider a second term.
You really think he would give up, though, and just say, I'm not doing this?
Well, that's the counter argument. You know, could he ever give up? I don't know.
Well, the brand new book comes out today. It's called Win Bigly, from the creator of Dilbert. Scott Adams, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, coming up straight ahead. Some soldiers died, and others were badly hurt trying to find Fox News Alert, and I'm happy to say U.S. Special Forces have captured one of the militants accused of orchestrating the deadly Benghazi attacks, and he's expected on U.S. soil to face charges. Here to talk more about that is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, Fox News contributor, retired Green Beret. Colonel, it's good to know the investigation continues. We all knew Khatallah was not the only guy involved. Previous administration made us think that. Why is this important?
Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. One, you know, taking down Mustafa al-Imam, and they did it, the SEALs went in and did it in a snatch and grab operation rather than an operation that would have been much easier in terms of a drone strike. One, they can get him out on a ship and they can interrogate him. Two, they can snatch up anything that was around him in terms of laptops or hard drives or any other type of evidence to take down the rest of the cell that was responsible for Benghazi. You know, and three, it sends a message around the world that you can run, but you can't hide. So this president has said we're taking the gloves off. He means it. And we're seeing, you know, as we've talked before, we have special operators in 60 to 80 countries around the world prosecuting this war on terror.
Yeah, good. I just wish he was steaming to Gitmo, where we might be able to get more, have a little bit more control than our court system, where we get people like Moussaoui who make proclamations and declarations and often get their chance to scream their mantras in court that the whole world gets to see.
Yeah, well, I can assure you, Brian, that steam back to the United States is probably going to be a slow one to give us plenty of time to interrogate him.
Yeah, but he knows where he's going, so I don't...
He knows where he's going, and I'm not sure the administration's change in policy here, where that came about. You just had a few days ago Attorney General Sessions saying that not only is Gitmo open for business, it's a completely appropriate place to send folks, and I agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll take a diversion before he gets to New York. Okay, now let's talk about Bowe Bergdahl. Yesterday, kind of a surprise, he came out and said, I made a horrible mistake. Saying I'm sorry is not enough. He sees how injured people got in hunting for him. He said, I tried to do something good and it turned out bad. And he went on to say what you're seeing right there. You actually led expeditions to go find him.
That's right.
How do you feel about it?
Well, listen, I'm glad he's finally manning up, frankly, and taking some responsibility for all of the harm that he caused. But that still doesn't take away the need for accountability. And I want to see him stripped of all rights as a veteran and a POW, and I'd still like to see life sentence. You know, the people that he harmed and the people that died looking for him don't get their lives back and don't get their limbs back. One of the sergeants that testified or came to court cannot testify. His wife had to speak on his behalf because from his head wound, he can't speak at all the rest of his life.
Sergeant, that's Sergeant Mark Allen. And I don't know what's going on, but he's also not speaking to his family. The word was that his dad gave him the advice just to leave and left that note and left camp. I don't know if that matters at all.
Well, look, one of the things that a point that I do want to make here, Brian, is that this trade that was made for him, the Taliban 5 made for Bergdahl, affects our hostages all over the world, because all of those other terrorist groups now expect a trade as high profile as what we did for Bergdahl. It undermined 5 decades of a no concessions policy. So he's still hurting folks around the world that are being held hostage today.
And that is a decision from the previous administration.
That's right.
And we are paying for that.
Disastrous trade we're still paying for it.
Right. Good point. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Waltz, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Julian Milley has the other news breaking while we were speaking.
That's right. Good morning, Brian. To you at home as well. The Mandalay Bay security guard and only eyewitness in the Las Vegas shooting could soon clear up any confusion about the timeline of the attack. Jesus Campos will reportedly be subpoenaed by a lawyer representing one of the victims to testify about the moments leading up to that shooting. 58 concertgoers died when a gunman opened fire from the Mandalay Bay into a crowded concert. The hotel now facing several lawsuits. He's a Hollywood A-lister that's been an outspoken critic of President Trump. But this morning, Bryan Cranston has the president's back. He tells the Hollywood Reporter, quote, "If he fails, the country is in jeopardy. It would be egotistical for anyone to say, I hope he fails. To that person, I would say, blank you." Why would you want that? So, can you be right? So you can be right. The actor's comments mark an abrupt change from his previous remarks in October 2016. Cranston said he would move to Canada if Trump were elected. Think he's staying put. Instead of chocolate and lollipops, parents found hard drugs in their kids' Halloween candy bag. Police in Wisconsin given this pack of crystal meth. It's unclear if it was dropped in the child's bag on purpose or not. Police now warning parents to check their kids' candy. This as cops in New Jersey and nearby states warn of marijuana-laced candy being given out. Dreams coming true under the Friday night lights for one high school senior. Virginia teen Seth Shirey, who has cerebral palsy, finally getting the chance to play in a game. Shirey running an 80-yard touchdown, his teammates and the opposing team clapping and cheering behind him. If you take a look, he fell into the end zone for his first score of his career. Gotta love stories like that, guys.
A dream come true for him.
Moment he'll never forget.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Shelley.
Talk about a dream come true. Is it true that Janice Dean is here?
She's not here. She's outside in the weather.
Can you see my flashing pumpkins?
We can. If we turn around, we're on the couch. If we turn around, we can see you outside.
Yeah,
flashing.
you can see me glowing in the dark?
Yeah.
Are you plugged in? What are you plugged into?
Well, I think it's like a battery.
Oh, okay.
Any day that I can wear flashing pumpkins is a good day for me.
It's the only flashing allowed here.
Right, exactly. No comment. Let's take a look at the map, shall we? You know what? It's going to be not too bad a night for trick-or-treating. A little cool, 49 in New York City. We'll take it. 29 in Minneapolis, 13 in Rapid City. So we do have a little bit of weather, but we're not talking about a big spooky storm. Across the Great Lakes, a little bit of snow, lake effect snow there, and then we have a system that's moving out of the Rockies that could bring some snow showers across the central U.S. So hopefully your costume is maybe a size or two bigger so that you can wear warm layers underneath your costume. There's the future radar, so that storm system moves out into the Central Plains. We do have the potential for showers and thunderstorms across the Gulf Coast, so watching that as we get into Wednesday, but otherwise a pretty great trick-or-treat forecast for much of the country. Again, you could, use your umbrella across Texas and Louisiana, and then those snow showers across the central U.S., but otherwise a pretty good forecast for some trick-or-treating. And I know we have some costumes coming up. This is not like the main event here. This is just, a preamble.
Indeed it is. All right, Janice Dean. That's cool. The way that I've never seen those portable lights like that.
Yeah, they make them for Christmas, too.
This whole battery thing is really catching on.
It's really neat.
There is this thing called the internet, too, the World Wide Web.
Just kidding.
All right, still ahead on this Halloween, Congressman Devin Nunes calling on the Department of Justice to dig into the deep state.
We're going to bring back a lot of people.
Well, let's hope they actually...
Or the DOJ could do their job and begin to investigate this.
Well, the congressman has two names in mind. Rob Schmidt will tell us who they are next.
And President Trump says the NFL should lose its tax breaks while players protest the anthem. Now our congressman one step closer to doing that, making it happen. He'll join us.
President Trump recently questioned the tax breaks NFL teams receive while their players disrespect the national anthem. And our next guest agrees, saying taxpayers pay more than 70% of the cost of the big stadiums in the United States. His proposal now likely to be included in the House tax reform bill. Florida Congressman, he's a Republican, Matt Gaetz joins us right now from Pensacola. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning.
So explain what your provision in the tax bill would do.
Well, in the coming days, Congress will be working to eliminate special interest loopholes in the tax code so that we can lower rates for all Americans. And I think a great place to start would be eliminating the tax exemption that is enjoyed by the NFL league office and other professional sports leagues. I don't think that the millionaires and billionaires associated with professional sports ought to get a special tax break that's not available to the regular small businesses and regular folks in my district and across America.
See, and that's an important point, Congressman. They get special provisions. They got all sorts of special things going in their direction. Taxpayers, as I mentioned a moment ago, pay over 70% of the cost of the stadiums, and then they're on the outside looking in at the place where you can buy $12 beers.
Well, you're so right, and I could not have a better partner in this effort than President Trump. Through Twitter, he's endorsed this concept that we should eliminate special tax benefits that the NFL receives, and I think that these protests that the NFL's engaged in, that the league office has seemingly embraced, has really drawn into sharp relief the treatment that they get, and it's just more proof that the average American doesn't need a 70,000-page tax code. Those are things that exist for special folks and special interests, and I'm glad that President Trump and Speaker Ryan want to do away with those things and lower rates for all Americans.
So, Congressman, what have you heard from your constituents regarding the anthem protests?
Well, I live in one of the districts that's got the most active duty military and some of the most veterans in all of America. And they simply do not understand why the NFL would go and embrace this unpatriotic conduct. And if there are players with concerns about racial inequality or the criminal justice system, rather than taking a knee, how about they take a stand and actually advocate for some proposals that they think might improve quality of life for people? Look, I serve on the Judiciary Committee where I could be of help. And so if there are NFL players that have got ideas, let's talk about those ideas, but let's not disrespect our troops and our veterans and all who love this great country by saying that America is not worth standing for. She absolutely is worth standing for, and that's why I think we need to do away with special breaks that those get who are embracing this unpatriotic conduct.
And you say that the money that they get in the form of those special breaks would be better spent at Walter Reed Army Hospital. Good point. All right, first-term Congressman from the great state of Florida, Matt Gaetz. Matt, thank you very much for joining us live.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Meanwhile, coming up on this Halloween, Chief of Staff John Kelly opening up about his feud with Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson over Gold Star families. Will he apologize? You'll hear from him directly next. And an attack ad in Virginia depicts Republicans as Confederates driving pickup trucks, hunting down minority children, running them down, that is to say. It's directed at Republican gubernatorial candidate Ed Gillespie. He is here to respond. Coming up.
Paul Manafort and Richard Gates officially charged in a 31-page indictment that doesn't mention the name Trump once.
A few minutes ago, the president tweeting, the fake news is working overtime, as Paul Manafort's lawyer said there was no collusion and events mentioned took place long before he came to the campaign. Few people knew the young, low-level volunteer named George, who has already proven to be a liar. Check the Dems.
Right. Here to react is Ed Klein, investigative journalist and author of a brand new book called All Out War, The Plot to Destroy President Trump. Ed, this is not all. You watch this thing play out, and this doesn't surprise you.
Not in the least. You know, you have to remember that Paul Manafort was hired to herd delegates for the Republican National Convention. He was there for 2 or 3 months. As soon as it was revealed that he had some dodgy, perhaps Kremlin-linked associates, he was fired from the campaign by Donald Trump.
But he ascended to run the campaign. He was supposed to wrangle delegates, but he ascended to run, and Corey Lewandowski was fired.
Yes, but he really was there for the delegate count. That's
because it looked like one of the other candidates might try to poach some.
That's right, exactly. And he was fired by Donald Trump, obviously did not want those connections to
The
Russia.
president says the things that he's in trouble for happened years before he even knew him.
Right.
So do you link those two, or do you find fault at all with the president?
I don't find fault with the president. I think the president's right. It is fake news. There's been not a scintilla of evidence that he's had any collusion with the Russians.
What about John Podesta's brother, Tony, has stepped away from that company because it was revealed yesterday, Company A, Company B, the Podesta Group is presumed to be either A or B, well, and they're hemorrhaging clients down on K Street.
Well, for good reason, because Manafort used the Tony Podesta company to do the lobbying for this guy in Ukraine. So it was all part of the Democratic, Republican establishment that Donald Trump's been talking about.
All right, let's go to a couple excerpts in your book that we think that need to be highlighted. One is this. This is actually page 210 in your book. Ties between three leaders, key leaders of the Oakland Group, met in Hamburg with the leader of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. There is evidence from informants that AQAP leader is helping the Oakland Group acquire weapons they are seeking, primarily bomb-making equipment and toxic chemicals and gases. Give me context for this.
The FBI sent a team of agents to Hamburg, Germany for the G2 conference of industrialized states, and there were a lot of protests at that time in Germany. And this Antifa group that we're talking about, the violent left-wing group from Oakland, was there, part of the protest, and then they started meeting in secret with Al-Qaeda operatives and ISIS operatives.
And the FBI knows about this?
And the FBI not only knows about it, but then did a report, which I reported in my book, that they sent to the director of the FBI.
That's scary stuff.
It's very scary stuff, because what it's saying, essentially, is that what Donald Trump said about the left-wing extremists being as dangerous at the right is absolutely true.
So you're saying Obama officials sat down with Al-Qaeda?
Obama officials?
Antifa.
Antifa officials.
Okay.
Right.
One other passage from the new book that comes out today regards another FBI report, and it goes like this. The FBI has gotten actionable intelligence that there is within the federal government a growing and organized movement to block or interfere with administration policy decisions. You know, we've heard a lot of people suggest the deep state is out there to get whatever Donald Trump wants to do. They won't let him do it. But for this to be part of an FBI report, that's amazing.
Well, they infiltrated the deep state in the meetings in Washington, D.C. These were people from the IRS, from the Environmental Protection Agency, from the Justice Department, and they were being given tips by union leaders and others how to sabotage Donald Trump's agenda.
Well, if they now know that it's going on, are they going to stop it?
Well, it's not clear. In this FBI report, it says, should we detain these people? Should we arrest these people? Or should we continue infiltrating and finding out more?
Okay. Ed Klein, thank you. The book is called All Out War, The Plot to Destroy Trump.
There's a lot of juicy stuff in there. Thanks, Ed.
All right, Jillian?
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Saw you this morning. Good morning, Ed. Good morning to you at home as well. Let's begin with this emotional testimony in Bo Bergdahl's sentencing hearing after a judge rules President Trump's comments would not keep him from receiving a fair trial. The disgraced Army sergeant offering a tearful apology to the service members wounded searching for him, saying, quote, "My words can't take away the pain that people have been through." Earlier, former Army Green Beret Commander Colonel Michael Waltz, who led the search for Bergdahl, said, "Sorry is not enough."
That still doesn't take away the need for accountability. And I want to see him stripped of all rights as a veteran and a POW, and I'd still like to see a life sentence.
Bergdahl faces life in prison, his sentence expected to be handed down by the end of the week. The Mandalay Bay security guard and only eyewitness in the Las Vegas shooting could soon clear up any confusion about the timeline of the attack. Jesus Campos will reportedly be subpoenaed by a lawyer representing one of the victims to testify about the moments leading up to the shooting. 58 concert goers died when a gunman opened fire from the Mandalay Bay into a crowded concert. The hotel now facing several lawsuits. Wild winds forcing the pilot of a packed passenger plane to abort a landing just feet off the ground. You can see the the Polish-run Enter Air flight, rocking side to side on its approach, then bumping the ground and immediately taking off again. This happening at Austria's Salzburg airport. It was so windy, the pilot had to fly an hour away and land in Frankfurt, Germany, where the flight originated. Frightening. Well, she couldn't get elected president, but maybe for at least today, Hillary Clinton can dress up like one.
What are you going to be for Halloween?
I think I will maybe come as the president.
I think that's a great idea.
The former Democratic nominee making those comments in Chicago, drawing quick reaction on social media. One person tweeting, sounds like she's not trick-or-treating in Wisconsin. What do you guys think about her costume? As being president?
It's hard to imagine. It's hard for me to picture it.
Does it mean her as president, or would she actually dress up like Donald Trump?
I took it as her.
I think it's her. I thought it was a clever response. It was pretty witty, quick, you know.
All right.
I don't know.
Thank you,
I know
Jillian.
a lot of people don't.
You talk about clever and witty. That's Janice Dean, and she is in our green room right now with some special kids.
Are you guys ready for Halloween? Yeah! Okay, we're going to do a quick forecast. What's your name?
Oliver.
And what's the forecast tonight?
It is a good night to trick-or-treat in New York.
In New York, fantastic. And what's your name?
Olivia.
And what's the forecast?
There's a little bit of rain in Texas.
A little bit of rain in Texas. And finally, what's your name?
Jagger.
And what's the forecast?
Some snow in the Rockies.
Some snow in the Rockies. You guys did great. Are you ready for the big Fox and Friends Halloween parade?
Yeah!
All right, it's coming up. Stay tuned, everybody. Tell everybody to stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Good job with those kids.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah. Cute. And we're going to be in our costumes within about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, 8 minutes before the top of the hour, breaking news. Tied to the Benghazi investigation, special forces have just captured a key militant tied to the attack that killed 4 Americans in 2012. We are live in Washington with what we've now learned about that operation and where that would-be terrorist is heading.
And last year, we were the United States of America. So what will we be this year? The big costume reveal coming up. You're watching Fox and Friends. It's Halloween.